Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Before we dive into Faye the Kite Runner Faye, I'd like to invite you to join me in a little thought experiment. Please close your eyes and reach deep into your memories to find that moment you've kept locked away the longest, the one you've been too afraid to confront. In that moment, there might be a truth you were too afraid to speak, a figure you turned away from out of selfishness, or a mistake that still causes a dull ache in your chest whenever you think of it. Did you find it? If you did, then congratulations. You've secured your ticket into the spiritual world of Afghan author Khaled Hosseini. Why am I discussing this book, which has been a bestseller for 20 years? At this particular moment, is it because it speaks of friendship? No, that would be too superficial. Is it because it exposes the cruelty of war? No, that is merely the backdrop. I chose it because, during the period of my life when I was most lost and most disgusted with myself, this book cut through my self-gen deceptive illusions. With the precision of a scalpel, it made me realize each of us we have all, at some point, chosen silence or escape during those dark alleyway moments, in pursuit of some form of worldly validation. When I read this passage, I didn't even dare to look at myself in the mirror, because Hosseini poses an excruciatingly sharp question in the book. If there is a black hole in your life that is destined to remain irreparable, how do you carry it and still live as a good person? This is not a book about how to seek forgiveness. It is a book about how to coexist with a broken self. Over the next 40 minutes, I hope you won't treat this as merely a tale from a distant land. I invite you to view it as a mirror reflecting the depths of your own soul. What we're going to discuss is the texture of life, the boundaries of perception, and above all, that fundamental aspect of human nature we spend our lives trying to escape, yet are compelled to look back upon time and again. The story begins in Kabul, in the Iten-Jobaiti Shimal. Back then, Afghanistan wasn't the war-torn torn ruin we see today on the news. It was a place filled with the scent of pomegranate blossoms, where kites crisscrossed the blue sky, and where poetry and ancient order reigned. At the logical starting point of this story stand two boys, Amir and Hassan. Amir is the son of a wealthy family. His father is a respected hero in Kabul. Hassan is the son of a servant and belongs to the Hazara ethnic group, which faces discrimination. They were raised on the same mother's milk. Hassan's first word was Amir, and Amir's first word was Dad. Logically, they were master and servant. But emotionally, they were more like symbiotic beings. Hassan possessed everything Amir lacked: a nearly divine loyalty and primal courage. He would protect Amir with his slingshot, shield him from all bullying, and even take the blame for a lie Amir told. Hosseini depicts a very subtle detail. Amir loves to read and write stories, while Hassan is illiterate. Amir would read stories to Hassan, but he would deliberately skip over complex vocabulary and even twist the plot to test Hassan's reactions. Whenever Hassan looked at him with adoration, a secret, dark sense of satisfaction would well up inside Amir. This reminds me of the subtle power dynamics in real-life social interactions. Have we not, in the presence of those less fortunate than ourselves, used a sense of intellectual superiority or the weight of our status to mask our inner vulnerability? When I read this passage, I felt a sense of inexplicable sadness. Many say that Hassan's love for Amir is noble. But here, I'd like to propose a perspective that might make some of you uncomfortable. This loyalty rooted in an unequal relationship is, in itself, a prelude to tragedy. Why couldn't Amir resist bullying Hassan? It wasn't merely because he was a bad person, but because Hassan's excellence acted as a mirror, reflecting Amir's own cowardice in the presence of his father. This touches on a core logic of life: survival under the shadow of patriarchy. Amir's father, the man called Dad, is a formidable man capable of killing a black bear with his bare hands. In his father's closed cognitive loop, if a person lacks the courage to stand up for himself, he will be unable to stand up for anything once he grows up. For the sensitive, delicate, poetry-loving Amir, this logic was nothing short of a crushing blow. His entire life was a struggle to earn even a fleeting glance of attention from his father. I personally understand this pain of longing but never having. When we idolize someone like a god, we develop a strong sense of self-loathing. Every time Amir hurt Hassan, he was actually taking revenge on his own self for not being tough enough. This is the essence of relationships. If we cannot accept ourselves, we cannot truly love the person who loves us. The winter of 1975 was the most magnificent yet most sordid moment in the entire story. It was Kabul's annual kite flying competition. This was not merely a game. It was Amir's only chance to prove to his father that he was a real man. On that winter afternoon, under his father's watchful gaze, Amir finally cut the strings of all his opponent's kites. He won, but winning wasn't enough. In Kabul's tradition, true glory came from retrieving the last blue kite that had fallen. Hassan went to help him chase that kite. Before leaving, Hassan turned back to Amir and uttered the famous line that would later move readers around the world: 1,000 times for you. Yet, in that dark alley, Hassan encountered Asef, the bully who believed in racial superiority. To protect Amir's kite, Hassan refused to back down, ultimately suffering unspeakable humiliation, and Amir stood at the entrance to the alley. He watched it all unfold. He heard Hassan's moans and saw the tears streaming from the corners of his eyes. He didn't rush out. He chose to turn away and run. Hosseini's depiction of this scene is incredibly cinematic, even carrying a cruel poetry. In that moment, Amir engaged in an extreme logical deduction. He thought, "He's just a Hazara, isn't he? As long as I get that kite, I'll get Dad's embrace, and I'll be able to end this life of being neglected." In that instant, he treated Hassan's blood as a sacrifice, offering it up to the fatherly love he had longed for. The detail that moved me most deeply wasn't Amir's flight, but the look in his eyes after he fled. When he saw Hassan return to the doorstep carrying the blood-stained kite, he didn't offer comfort or embrace him. He cared only about whether the kite was intact. Here, I'd like to pause and share a few more thoughts with you. Many readers will condemn Amir as a scumbag at this point. But I want to say something that might sound harsh. If you had been the one in that alley, can you really guarantee you would have rushed in? Most of us, when faced with extreme violence and the temptation of personal gain, are rarely heroes. We are the ordinary people hiding around the corner, holding our breath, praying that disaster won't befall us. The tragedy of Amir lies in the fact that he was too clever. He was clever enough to construct a perfect logical justification for his own cowardice. This banality of evil is everywhere in our daily lives. Remaining silent about the injustices suffered by a colleague to keep our job, or joining in the ostracism of another person just to fit in. In that moment, Amir killed not only Hassan's dignity, but also that part of his own soul known as integrity. When I read this, I felt not only heartache for Hassan, but also a deep despair regarding human nature. Because Hosseini reveals a terrifying truth. Betrayal often begins with those who love us most, because only they would choose not to resist, for the sake of our own fulfillment. This texture of life is so heavy. That night, Amir received his father's embrace, the coronation he had longed for, but he soon discovered that the blood-stained blue kite had become the backdrop for every nightmare of the rest of his life. He thought he had escaped the alley, but in reality, he had locked himself forever in that winter of Itzen Jobai Tsishawu. When evil leads to good, that is true salvation. Rashid Khan, this is a golden line from the book. But I'd like to add my own interpretation here. Before you can be saved, you must first serve time in hell. Amir's imprisonment had only just begun. The logic of reality is often counterintuitive. When you owe someone deeply and lack the courage to apologize, what you most want to do is not to draw closer to them, but to make them disappear completely. After the kites and flying competition, Amir was plunged into a near-Zan morbid agony. Hassan remained as loyal as ever. The more he acted as if nothing had happened, the more he worked without complaint, the more Amir felt that those silent eyes were like a mirror that exposed his true nature, constantly reminding him of his own vileness. So Amir did something even more cruel than turning and running away. He secretly slipped his birthday gifts, an expensive watch, and a stack of cash under Hassan's pillow. Then, he lied to his father, accusing Hassan of theft. In Afghanistan at that time, theft was an unforgivable crime. Amir believed that once Hassan was gone, he could start over and enjoy his father's affection with a clear conscience. There's a detail here that cuts me to the core every time I read it, when his father asked Hassan, "Did you steal something?" Hassan glanced at Amir, then bowed his head and said, "Yes." In that moment, Hassan once again sacrificed his own honor to protect Amir. He knew it was Amir's trap, but he chose to go along with it. This reminds me of a psychological term called victim empathy. Sometimes, the one who has been hurt sees through the cruelty of the situation even sooner than the perpetrator. Hassan's yes was his final farewell to this friendship, and also the last lesson he taught Amir. My loyalty extends even to going along with your shamelessness. Reading this, I felt a suffocating sense of dread, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I want to ask you all, have you ever had this kind of experience? When you've done something wrong to someone and you see them, your first reaction isn't guilt, but anger, a furious, embarrassed rage that screams, "Why do you even show your face to remind me of my mistakes?" This is the darkest phallogical loops in human nature. To protect our fragile sense of self, we instinctively alleviate our guilt by smearing the victim. Amir didn't become a better person, he sank even deeper into depravity. He used the very crime his father detested most to frame the person who loved him most. Yet what shocked me even more was the father's reaction. That father, usually so stern as to be heartless, was actually in tears at that moment, forgiving Hassan and begging him to stay. This was something I didn't understand on my first read. Why would a father who valued dignity above all else lose his composure so completely over a servant? It wasn't until later that we learned the reason. The father, too, had buried a similarly unspeakable secret of betrayal within himself, one he shared with Hassan. In this household, every member used their mistreatment of Hassan to conceal their own festering sores. Hassan was not a servant. He was the family's sole scavenger, bearing the weight of all their filth while maintaining the purity of his character. In Itzen Jobai Bashi, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The once-then peaceful Kabul collapsed overnight. Amir and his father were forced to abandon all their possessions, squeezing into the tank of a fuel truck, and narrowly escaped to Pakistan, eventually making their way to California in the United States. In California, the father who once ruled Kabul with an iron fist became a lowly immigrant toiling at a gas station, and Amir, who had once lived a life of luxury, began setting up a stall at a flea market to sell second-hand goods. The American sun shines brilliantly, and the high-tech atmosphere of Silicon Valley stands in stark contrast to the mud walls of Kabul. Amir seemed to have found a new lease on life here. He fell in love, got married, and became a writer, and his life appeared to be moving toward a logical closure. Hosseini describes a telling detail. Amir met his future wife, Soraya, at the flea market. Soraya, too, had a secret past, which she bravely confessed to Amir. In that moment, a powerful urge surged through Amir. He, too, wanted to tell the story of Hassan, the alley, and the blue kite. But in the end, he remained silent. He reassured himself, "This is America. There are no alleys here, no kites. The past is buried." For many of us, when we face setbacks or make mistakes, our first instinct is to escape. We move to a different city, change jobs, or find a new partner, believing that this will wipe the past clean. But I want to say that moving to a new place often merely provides a layer of more elegant wrapping paper. It covers the wound, but it does not cure the infection. The more fulfilling Amir's life in California became, the more pitiful I found him, because his happiness was built on a foundation of selective blindness. He dared not look at the kites in the sky, dared not write home, and dared not face any news from Afghanistan. He had become a deserter from his own life. This state of existence is actually quite universal. Each of us, to a greater or lesser extent, plays the role of a perfect survivor. We showcase our polished lives on social media and boast at parties, but only late at night, when the person you once hurt or the mistake you made comes to mind. Do you realize you've merely fled from a visible Kabul into an invisible prison built of guilt? Amir's father died in the United States. He died a hero, refusing to accept American social welfare until his very last moment. But the heaviest legacy his father left Amir was not the gas station, nor the meager savings, but that phone call from Rahim Khan in Nanseniuni. Amir received a call from Rahim Khan, his father's best friend. Rashid Khan spoke only one sentence over the phone, yet it caused the walls of defense Amir had built over more than 20 years to crumble. He said, "Come back. There is a way to be good again." Amir returned to Pakistan and met with the dying Rashid Khan. There, he learned a shocking secret. Hassan was actually the illegitimate son of his father and Ali's wife. In other words, Hassan was his half-Jan brother. This twist propelled the book's narrative to an excruciatingly cruel climax. It turned out that the father who had spent his entire life teaching Amir that stealing is the root of all evil was, in fact, the greatest thief of all. He stole Ali's dignity, stole Hassan's rightful place, and stole Amir's trust in him. Why did the father devote his life to charity? Why did he run an orphanage in Kabul? Why did he remain so tough in California? Because he too was atoning for his sins. He transformed his guilt toward Hassan into generosity toward others. There is a particularly thought-provoking detail here. Rahim Khan tells Amir, "Your father is a torn man." When I read this, I felt an indescribable sense of irony. It turned out that the perfect father Amir had always tried to please and emulate was, in fact, just like him, a coward hiding behind lies. This made me re-examine the concept of Fae paternal authority. Fae. Often, the high standards fathers set for their children are actually illusion. Amir sacrificed Hassan for this illusion, while his father sacrificed the truth for it. In different ways, father and son betrayed the very person who loved them both. I'd like to share a thought here. Lies have a life of their own. They evolve and can even be passed down. If Amir had known early on that Hassan was his brother, would he still have stood at the entrance of the alley and not gone in? Perhaps he would have, perhaps not. But the delayed revelation of the truth imbues this betrayal with a tragic, fratricidal quality. Here, I'd like to pause and elaborate a bit. Many people feel that since the father also made mistakes, shouldn't Amir be able to forgive himself? After all, we're all equally flawed is a common source of psychological comfort. Instead, this truth strikes like a sledgehammer, shattering Amir's last shred of pretense. You can no longer view Hassan merely as the son of a servant. He is your flesh and blood. He is a part of you. When you stood at the alleyway watching him suffer humiliation, you betrayed yourself. Through Rashid Khan's account, Amir learns of Hassan's fate. Hassan has settled down and started a family. He has a beautiful wife and a bright son, Sorab. Even though Kabul has become a living hell, Hassan still guards Amir's old house, waiting for his master to return. When the Taliban arrived at the courtyard gate and demanded that Hassan leave, he stood his ground to protect the home that was sacred and inviolable in his heart. In the end, Hassan and his wife were executed by the Taliban in the very courtyard they had guarded their entire lives. The bullets entered the back of their heads. Even in death, Hassan harbored no resentment toward Amir. He had written Amir a letter, filled with nostalgia for Kabul's past, and hoped that Amir would return. When Rashid Khan handed the letter to Amir, the paper had already yellowed. In the letter, Hassan wrote, "I dream of flowers blooming on the streets of Kabul, of music playing once more in the tea houses, and of kites soaring through the sky again. I dream that my son will become a man of worth." This was the purest blessing from a man surviving amidst the ruins, sent to his brother far away in paradise. America, reading this, I truly could not suppress the grief welling up inside me. This was not merely because of Hassan's death, but because Hassan never knew, even until his dying breath, that the home he had guarded was, in fact, built from the very beginning upon a deception against him. Here, I would like to propose a thought that might seem rather extreme. Was Hassan's kindness, in a way also a sin? His almost blind loyalty and selfless love, to a certain extent, actually Zajon Amir's psychological burden. Because this love was too heavy, so heavy, that an ordinary person could simply not bear it, and could only find relief through escape. But conversely, without the divine radiance of a figure like Hassan, would Amir's soul have had any chance of salvation? With his death, Hassan has driven Amir to the edge of a cliff. Now Amir faces only two paths: either return to the United States to live as a coward, tormented by this letter for the rest of his life, or brave the wars and torn landscape and return to a Kabul that has been utterly transformed to rescue Hassan's only blood relative. The boy named Sorab, the ticket to redemption has been laid before him. But this is no longer a simple journey. It is a Fae leap of consciousness. Fae, he must evolve from a refined egoist into a warrior who dares to face the abyss. For an unnamed hero, we often pay the price of generations to honor his memory. But for a loved one we have destroyed with our own hands, we often must sacrifice our entire lives to atone. This is a sentence I jotted down in the margin of the page when I read this chapter. The moment Amir crossed the Afghan border, he was not merely crossing a geographical boundary. He was crossing the Fey boundaries of consciousness. Fey. 26 years ago, when he fled this place, he was a coward burdened by guilt. 26 years later, he returned to search for a boy named Saurabh, Hassan's son. The Kabul of today was no longer the place blooming with pomegranate flowers that Amir remembered. It had become a battlefield under Taliban rule. The streets were filled with beggars. The great trees had been cut down for firewood. People gathered in the stadium not to watch soccer, but to witness public executions. Amir searched through the ruins. He had returned to his long-time abandoned home, the once-dan magnificent mansion now in utter disrepair. On the wall, he found the inscription from years past. Amir and Hassan, Sultans of Kabul. The words remain, but the Sultan named Hassan has long since turned to dust. Here, Hosseini depicts an incredibly poignant detail. Amir encounters a filthy blind beggar on the street. During their conversation, he is astonished to discover that this beggar was once a colleague of his mother's when she taught at the university. This detail strikes like a sledgehammer. It tells us that the cruelest aspect of war lies not in the destruction of bodies, but in its utter shattering of the dignity of civilization. A professor who once discussed Shakespeare now survives by scavenging for a morsel of bread in the trash. Reading this, I felt an overwhelming sense of absurdity. Amir is seeking redemption here, while the entire nation is undergoing a prolonged collective destruction. I would like to raise a point here, in the face of a grand historical tragedy. Does the evil of an individual seem insignificant? Many would say that compared to the tens of thousands who died in the war, what does Amir's petty selfishness from back then amount to? But I believe this is precisely the author's deepest logic. The tragedies of an era are often composed of countless small, ordinary evils. If everything falls up in that alleyway, if every father had faced his own lies with honesty, perhaps that all-consuming war would not have raged with such apparent inevitability. Amir returned to his hometown. He wasn't just looking for a child. He was searching for the self he had lost. That texture of life feels particularly heavy amidst these ruins. You must first see the face of hell to understand the price of paradise. A sense of fate is what makes this book so captivating. In his search for Saurabh, Amir ultimately finds himself facing that very person. Asif, the bully of yesteryear, Asif, has now risen to a high ranking position in the Taliban. He holds Saurabh by the hand, the boy who bears a striking resemblance to Hassan. Saurabh has been painted with eyeshadow and is forced to dance before Asif like a plaything. Asif recognizes Amir. He proposes a diabolical deal. You may take the boy, but first, we must settle the score from all those years ago. Asif slipped on brass knuckles and launched a frenzied attack on Amir. Amir was beaten until his ribs were broken, his upper lips split open, and his face covered in blood. But at that moment, a miracle happened. Amir didn't scream, he actually burst out laughing. Imagine the scene. A middle-aged man being savagely beaten by a thug, his body shattering, yet he laughs like a child. Amir thought to himself, I feel at peace. I don't feel any pain. It's as if that punch knocked all my guilt right out of me. For 26 years, he had been under the constant judgment of his conscience. He had been waiting for this beating, waiting for this physical agony to offset the debt of his soul. It was an extremely twisted, yet utterly real theological loops. This was the moment in the entire book that shook me the most. When I read this part, I put the book down and thought about it for why do we seek forgiveness through pain? Here, I'd like to share an observation that might seem cold. Humans possess an instinct known as guilt compensation. When we feel unworthy of happiness, we subconsciously seek out pain to achieve psychological balance. The reason Amir's previous life in America was an illusion is that he paid no price for it. Now, however, that split upper lip, which makes him resemble Hassan with his cleft lip, and those broken ribs are the real, tangible price he has paid for that ticket to redemption. This reminds me of how, in life, we often fear conflict and fear the cost. But sometimes, avoiding pain does not bring us liberation. Only by facing the pain head-on and settling that debt can we attain true peace at our core. Had he not endured that brutal beating, Amir would never have been able to look Sohrab in the eye, even if he had saved him. Amir fled to Pakistan with Sohrab. But the path to redemption did not end there. True despair often strikes after victory. To bring Sohrab back to the United States, Amir faced a complex legal process. In a moment of utter helplessness, Amir broke his promise to Sohrab and suggested that he return to the orphanage temporarily. This child, who had endured countless abandonments and humiliations, completely broke down. He chose to slit his wrists in an attempt to take his own life. Although Sohrab was ultimately saved, he shut his heart completely. He no longer spoke, no longer smiled, and no longer reacted to the world in any way. He became a living ghost. This state was like a mirror that had been shattered countless times. Even if you glued it back together, the world it reflected was now nothing but cracks. Amir brought him back to the United States, gave him the best room, and showed him the utmost patience. But Sohrab remained silent. This silence weighed heavier than any accusation. This is where I personally admire the author, Hosseini, the most. He did not write a cheap happily ever after ending. Through Sohrab's silence, he tells us a brutal truth. Redemption cannot erase the harm. We often harbor a delusional expectation that as long as we apologize, as long as we make amends, the other person should be okay. But in reality, harm has momentum. It settles like a toxin deep within a person's soul, causing permanent physical changes. Sohrab's silence is a silent rebellion against the world, against Amir, and against fate itself. He is asking us if my innocence has been destroyed. If trust has been trampled upon, what right do you have to demand that I smile again? Reading this, I felt the texture of life, the texture of irreversibility. We must acknowledge that some things in this world, once shattered, remain shattered. So Dan called redemption is not about restoring the broken pieces to their original state, but about learning to cherish those shards. The story concludes on an afternoon after the rain. Amir takes Sohrab to a gathering of Afghan immigrants. People are flying kites in the sky. Amir picks up a kite and begins to demonstrate for Sohrab the skill he and Hassan had perfected together back in the day. Just like Hassan had done back then, he deftly cut the opponent's string. He turned his head and saw the corner of Sohrab's mouth lift ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly. It was just a fleeting moment. Amir was overjoyed. He saw a kite fall and ran after it like a child. As he ran, he shouted those words that spanned 30 years, 2 generations, and the boundaries of life, death, and sin. For you, 1,000 times over. 30 years ago, Hassan chased the kite to make Amir who he was. 30 years later, Amir chased the kite to awaken Hassan's son. In that moment, the wind shifted. Amir was no longer the child standing at the alleyway, waiting for the kite. He had become the one chasing it. This is perhaps one of the greatest endings in literary history. It is not perfect, but it is incredibly powerful. When I read that final line, I couldn't help but shed tears. I don't see this as a complete salvation, but I do see the evolution of a soul. In that moment, Amir finally broke free from the phaeological loop of guilt and escape Fae. He no longer expected Sorab to forgive him instantly, nor did he expect to become a saint again. He simply accepted it all. His own cowardice, Hassan's death, and Sorab's disability. Then, he chose to run. I believe this is the ultimate wisdom this book offers us. Redemption is never an outcome, but a process. As long as you keep running, as long as you keep chasing that kite that represents integrity and conscience, you still retain the essence of life. With that, the story of Faith the Kite Runner feigned comes to an end. But I want to ask you all, where is that kite in your heart right now? This novel uses its immense length to reveal a cruel truth. All human suffering often stems from our lack of courage to make the right choice at that moment in the alley. Yet it also offers us a warm hope. No matter how cowardly you once were, no matter how many irreparable mistakes you've made, life will always leave you a path to become a good person again. It may require you to traverse the fires of war, endure excruciating pain, and devote the rest of your life to patience. Personally, I don't believe Amir fully redeemed himself in the end. I think he simply found a way to coexist with his guilt. Carrying that scar, he became a more profound person. Here, I'd like to pose an open-ended question to spark discussion in the comments section. In Amir's life, which moment do you think was the most pivotal turning point toward redemption? Was it when he confessed his secret to Rahim Khan? Or when he laughed under Asif's fist? Or perhaps when he chased the kite for Sorab in the park at the very end? If you were Sorab, would you forgive this uncle, who was beaten to a pulp to save you, yet also indirectly caused your father's tragedy? In truth, whether or not he is forgiven no longer matters. What matters is that Amir is finally no longer a survivor. He has become a pursuer. May each of us, after seeing the darkness of human nature and recognizing the truth of life, still be able to shout out like Amir, amidst the ruins of time, for the sake of a better version of ourselves. For you, 1,000 times over. Thank you all for joining me on this 40-minute journey of reflection. If you've seen a part of yourself in this story, please like and share.